قل مسعدا أهلا وخلا ليته في كل حين.
بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for joining us for another edition in our series Serenity in Salah. Yesterday we were speaking about having a new beginning when you stand in prayer, having a new beginning with your emotions with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We spoke about the emotion of al-raja, which is a hope and an urge and a longing for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today we want to speak about another emotion, an equally important emotion that we need to feel when we stand in front of Allah, and one which balances out what we spoke about yesterday. Today we're going to speak about al-hayba, which is a reverence and a feeling of awe in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In truth, this is a kind of fear that you need to feel in your heart when you stand in front of Allah. Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anh, when he would approach prayer, he would begin to shake. His entire body would begin shaking, and his face would become pale. The blood would be drained out of his face. And it would be obvious to the people that he was overcome by fear. So they asked him, Malik ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, that what is wrong, O leader of the believers? And so he replied to them with a very amazing and beautiful statement. He said, جاء وقت الصلاة وقت أمانة عرضه الله على السماوات والأرض والجبال فأبين أن يحملنها وأشفقن منها وحملتها أنا. He said, the time of prayer has come, the time of trust. He called prayer a trust and a responsibility that Allah has given us. He said the time of trust which Allah has offered to the heavens and to the earth and to the mountains. But they rejected and refused to carry this responsibility. And they feared of it, but I have accepted it. And so he would approach prayer with an intense fear, a fear that Allah would not accept his prayer, a fear that this responsibility and entrustment that Allah had given him was something that he was going to improperly use or something that he was going to lose. Now when we talk about fear, we need to explain, what kind of fear are we actually speaking about? What does it mean when we talk about fear? Imam Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala speaks about the different kinds of fear that a person can feel in their heart when they stand in front of Allah. He says that the first kind of fear is al-khawf. And al-khawf is, a primal type of fear. So for example, when Musa alayhi salam sees the burning bush, and he doesn't know what it is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَوْجَسَ فِي نَفْسِهِ خِيفَةً Musa. That Musa felt in himself a type of khifa, a type of primal fear, because he didn't know what it is that he was going to approach. And so, this is the kind of fear you would feel if you were confronted by a lion or if you're confronted by a bear. You don't know what's going to happen, so you feel afraid. The second type of fear that Ibn Qayyim mentions is al-khashya. And this is what he defines as fear with knowledge. Like we said, usually people are afraid when they don't know what's going to happen. So for example, if you shut off all the lights and it's dark, a lot of people won't know, they'll feel afraid because they don't know what's going to happen. But he says that's not khashya. Khashya is when you have knowledge and also you're afraid. And so it's a higher level of fear. And so the people who have knowledge in Allah and also have fear in Allah are people who are worshipping Allah at a greater level. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاءِ. That indeed only those who possess knowledge truly have a khashya of Allah, truly have this kind of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in this beautiful month of Ramadan, we want to aim for the highest. We want to achieve the best level of fear that we can feel when we stand in front of Allah. And so the highest level of fear that Ibn Qayyim mentions is al-hayba. And al-hayba is what he defines as khawf bi'ilm wa ta'zim. That it is fear with knowledge and with the glorifying of Allah, and with the exalting of Allah, and with respect and reverence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you know His power and His strength and you glorify Him subhanahu wa ta'ala for it. So these are the kinds of fear that Ibn Qayyim mentions, and the kind of fear that we want to have. Now someone might ask us, a very simple question, be like, yesterday you spoke to us about having hope when we're in prayer. Now today you're talking to us about having fear when we're in prayer. Well, which one is it? And how can I even have both of them? Is it possible to have both emotions? And not only is it possible, but it's something that we do often with the creation of Allah. So for example, sometimes, a child, if they did something wrong, they fear that their father is going to punish them. And they fear that their father is going to be displeased and angry with them. But at the same time, they have hope for the mercy and the kindness of their father. And so they're able to have both emotions. Sometimes a student, might be afraid of their teacher marking them badly or being harsh with them or not being fair with them. So they're afraid of a punishment of their teacher, but they're also hoping in the kindness and in the mercy of the teacher that they have. So they have both emotions going on at the same time. And so, in fact, Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he talked about the emotions of a slave during worship. He compared it to a bird. And he said, one wing of the bird is hope in Allah, and the other wing of the bird is fear in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it's such a beautiful analogy, because if you took a bird and you clipped one of the wings, then the bird would survive for a little bit and then die, because it can't eat properly, it can't find shelter properly, it can't get around properly, and so it would probably die after a little while. And this is exactly the analogy of of a slave who tries to worship Allah with only one of these emotions. So if you try to worship Allah only with hope in His mercy and nothing else, no fear from His punishment, just hope in His mercy, then what would happen is that the person would find it easier and easier to sin, easier and easier to disobey Allah, easier and easier to transgress against the rights of Allah, until their heart becomes completely dark from all the sins they've committed, and then they just neglect and forget Allah altogether. And if you tried to worship Allah only with fear in His punishment, absolutely no mercy, hope in His mercy, then the person, would find the religion to be too difficult. And they would begin to despair very easily. And they would feel like Allah is never going to forgive them. And then they would just, get fed up and leave the religion altogether. And so it's very important that we worship Allah with both hope in His mercy and also fear from His punishment. And to have both emotions, very intense. A very intense type of hope and a very intense type of fear in the punishment of Allah. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he said some beautiful dua that illustrate this reality. He said, a very beautiful dua, he said, Allahumma inni a'udhu biridaka min sakhatik, wa bimu'afatika min uqubatik, wa bika mink. He said, I seek refuge in your pleasure from your displeasure. And I seek refuge in your pardon, in your forgiveness from your punishment. And I seek refuge in you from you. A'udhu bika mink. I seek refuge in you from you. Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala says, we could write a tremendous amount of books simply about this statement of the Prophet, I seek refuge in you from you. Subhanallah. He said, but those of true knowledge who understand the statement of the Prophet, they have discovered something that cannot be written down. They have discovered something that eyes do not see and which ears do not hear. This is the beauty of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not like the fear of anything else. The fear of anything else causes you to run away and to flee, to run from the thing that you are afraid of. But the fear of Allah causes you to walk towards the one whom you are afraid of. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَفِرُّوا إِلَى اللَّهِ. So flee onto Allah. Who are you fleeing from? You're fleeing from Allah, from His displeasure, from His anger, from His punishment. And who are you fleeing to? You're fleeing to Allah, to His mercy, to His forgiveness, and to His pardon. And so our fear of Allah, if somebody asked us, how do I gain fear of Allah? Our fear of Allah increases with two things. Increases with knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that you know Allah, and also it increases with knowledge of your own self. And so as for knowledge of your own self, I can't lecture you about that. Everybody knows themselves best. Everybody knows what it is that they have done. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَذِيرًا. That indeed no man will be a witness against himself. On the Day of Judgment, we will all be witnesses against our own selves, against our own deeds. وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَذِيرًا. Even if you try to put forth excuses, you're still going to be a witness against yourself. You know yourself the best. And so the more you increase in knowledge of your faults, knowledge of your own misdeeds, knowledge of the things that you have done, the more you remember the time that you closed the door and you hid from the public eye and you did something haram, that increases your fear of Allah. And also, when you increase in the knowledge of Allah, when you know the greatness of Allah and the power of Allah and the majesty of Allah, that increases your fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who is the one who is able to bless you? And who is the one who is able to give you every blessing that you want? Imagine Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says a very beautiful verse, قُلْ أَرَأَيْتُمْ إِنْ أَخَذَ اللَّهُ سَمْعُكُمْ وَأَبْصَارُكُمْ وَخَتَمَ عَلَى قُلُوبِكُمْ مَنْ إِلَهٌ غَيْرُ اللَّهِ يَأْتِيكُمْ بِهِ. That have you considered, if Allah were to take away your seeing, your hearing, and your sight, and set a seal upon your heart, what God other than Allah can bring it back to you? What entity other than Allah, what object other than Allah can bring these back to you? If Allah decided to take away every blessing that you have, your sight and your hearing and your feeling and the guidance that He's put in your heart, who can bring it back to you other than Allah? Who can take it away and who can give it back to you other than Allah? This is the great power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And these are the questions that we need to think about when we stand in prayer, so that we too can have serenity in our prayer. And so inshallah, join us tomorrow. We're going to speak about an even more important emotion that you need to feel when you stand between the hands of Allah. Jazakumullahu khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.